I'll quote Tony from Boston, and here's his problem with Christianity. To me, it's a religion that is absolute. So they'd say, that's the problem. That's the problem. Christians think in terms of black and white, not shades of gray. There's not gray areas within evangelical Christianity. It's black or white, correct or wrong. It's interesting listening to all of us say what the middle ground is, even in our wording of things. We weren't thinking middle ground of things. We were judgmental of them. Tony says, you know, it's interesting. Christians are judgmental and they bother us, so we judge them. It's an interesting observation from a hypocrite. Maybe I'm doing it myself by saying black and white, but that's to me just a statement of fact that's neutral. Some people may be fine with being black and white. Some people prefer shades of gray. It doesn't make one thing more correct than the other. So here is what Tony is saying, and it summarizes many of the conversations in all of the cities. Christians think black and white, and that's wrong. Everything is gray. There is no ultimate right or wrong. And he says, my problem with Christianity is it's black and white, not gray. Two things I'll point out. Number one, to think that way, you're making a black and white statement. Are Christians good or bad? They're bad. Oh, so they're not gray. They're not gray. No. I believe in gray, and for sure, black and white, they're wrong. So what is your problem? They have absolute beliefs. Are you absolutely sure they're wrong? Yes, I am. Okay? If you're sober, you're getting this, okay? So Tony goes on to say, here's what Tony says, and I'm just quoting Tony. Personally, in my life, I don't have any room for evangelical beliefs. I'd like to say it's because I'm logical. I have faith entirely in myself. That's an interesting statement. We have faith in Jesus. Tony has faith in Tony. We're both trusting one guy. I'm just going to say my guy's a better choice. That's all. I don't have the same beliefs, but to give it to somebody else, just to have an open mind. If something feels wrong with it, then back out. When I dump it, he says, when I say dump it, Christianity, he says, quote, that's my black and white response. Tony says, I only believe in gray, but when it comes to Christianity, dump it, that's my black and white response. So here's what happens is, both Christians and non-Christians, we use black and white thinking. Christians and non-Christians will say that certain things are wrong, and we get upset about it. That's why there's pickets and protests and social media posts and lots of cultural upheaval. But what happens is we tend to think gray is for me, black and white is for you. So I'm going to show you what's wrong with you, but you can't judge me. This is the hypocrisy. This is the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy is gray for me, black and white for you. You're wrong, I'm right. You can't judge me. There is no right and wrong. And so what I learned as I was reading the transcripts, 400 pages over and over and over and over and over, I found that every time somebody would make a black and white judgment against Christianity, they would use a verbal qualifier. Let me read them to you. I think, I feel, for me, to me, I personally believe, not to judge. Do you know what somebody does right before they judge? They say, not to judge. In my opinion, personally, from my perspective, in my experience, I believe my belief system not to be stereotypical, not to be judgmental, from my understanding, in my mind, in my life, in my case, and I try not to be judgmental, but. Do you know what the difference between in my personal opinion, from my experience, I think you're an idiot versus you're an idiot? You know what the difference is? Nothing. This one just used more words and took more time. That's the only difference. So what happens is everybody's judging everybody, and some people say that there is no judgment, so then we have to put verbal qualifiers, which is just a lot of smoke and a lot of theatrics and a lot of illusion. So as I looked at the data and dug deeper into it, what I discovered was, again, the number one objection is intolerance, and there is an old tolerance versus a new tolerance. There is a gentleman named Dr. Don Carson. He wrote a book, The Intolerance of Tolerance, and he looked at the dictionary definition of tolerance, and what he found was that actually in the Western world, in the English language, over the course of some years, the definition of the word tolerance has changed. So Christians tend to think in terms of what I'll call the old tolerance. Non-Christians tend to think in terms of what I'll call the new tolerance. The old tolerance was that morality was like math, if I could use a simple analogy. Okay? How many of you are math teachers? How many of you, have a degree in math? You can't walk into the classroom and say, in my opinion, according to my experience, who are you to judge? I have my own answer to the problem. Do not red ink my paper, right? Because in math, there is a right answer, there's a wrong, or there's a whole bunch of wrong answers. So the belief was that morality was like math, that math is fixed, that math is unchanging, that math doesn't vary from culture to culture or from generation to generation. 2 plus 2 was 4, is 4, and will forever be 4. And so in math, the assumption is that there is an answer, and that if you and I disagree, we can't both be right. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm right. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe we both got the math wrong. But the good thing is that we tolerate one another. We endure with one another. We put up with one another, and we dialogue about it because maybe you're right and I need to change. Maybe I'm right, you need to change. Maybe we're both wrong and we both need to change. Through disagreement and dialogue, assuming that the other person is probably wrong, we'll come to the truth. Okay? Now, the new tolerance says, you're right and I'm right. And I celebrate you and you celebrate me. So it's not just enough to put up with me when you think I'm wrong. You're not allowed to think I'm wrong. And it's not enough for you to just let me do my thing. You need to celebrate my thing, and I need to celebrate your thing. That's why our culture has these two words all the time: celebrate and pride. For all kinds of issues and causes. You should be proud of your answer, and I should celebrate it. And I should be proud of my answer, and you should celebrate it. That is the new definition of tolerance. It's gone from, I think you're wrong, but I'm going to put up with you and we're going to hash it out, to we're both right and neither of us gets to make any declaration that the other even has the possibility of being wrong. Now, where this all started is in the 1960s. It's where a lot of bad things started, by the way. Okay, in the 1960s, what happened in public schools was something called values clarification education. If you were born after the 1960s, this is the world you were reared in. This is the reality that you perceive from. And it was, there is no right or wrong. There is no moral standard. There is no objectivity. There's nothing that would qualify as truth. There is nothing beyond the self. The highest authority is me. Therefore, the student needs to get in touch with their feelings, their perspectives, their ideas, their conclusions without judging anyone else. And that has led to an entire curriculum. And my question would be, number one, why did we pick tolerance? Like, where did we get that? Who voted for that? Based upon what? And furthermore, why do we assume that something is new is automatically better than something that's old? Right? If Christianity is a few thousand years old and the biggest movement in the history of the world and has led to the greatest human flourishing, why would we look at it and say it's old? Maybe it's just proven.